GoPro is a category-defining company that's as synonymous with action cameras as Kleenex is with facial tissue. It went from being over $1 billion market cap to just a fraction of that in just a few years span of time. So the question is, what was behind GoPro's meteoric success? And then the slide that happened afterwards. Today we're in Half Moon Bay, California at the original headquarters for GoPro. Welcome to Ground Floor Innovation Channel. This is the GoPro story. GoPro was founded in 2002 by Nick Woodman. Nick was a surfer on a surf trip to Australia with his friends. And he thought, you know, the waves that we're getting are so epic, I can't wait to tell people back home about it, but it would be so much better if I could show them these rides that we're getting. The problem is, back then, the only alternative to capturing any kind of footage was either taking a traditional camera and having a bulky custom case for it, or using one of these disposable cameras, waterproof cameras. Nick was joking, he's like, there's no way this is gonna work. I would look like Flava Flav out there on the waves with this rubber band hanging off of my neck, and I'd never be able to get the camera up in time. So those options weren't working for him. He thought really the ideal solution would be a camera that was waterproof, that could flip into position quickly, get that money shot, and then put it away when you're not using it. But such a product didn't exist. And that really was the light bulb moment behind GoPro. It was an action camera that could be used for surfing. And in fact, the name Hero, which was the name for the GoPro cameras, was because it makes you look like a hero. These initial cameras that Nick pioneered were film-based cameras. So they were not that dissimilar from the Kodak action sports cameras that were available at the time. But the form factor was superior for use in surfing. Eventually, what Nick realized is this audience for such a product is even bigger than just surfers. This is something that other people for all kinds of action sports could use. So one of the things that he figured out quite quickly was it was a lot about the durability of the camera, number one, and number two, the mounting flexibility. And he arrived at this by mounting a camera to the roll bar of a race car and realizing that, wow, I can get amazing driving footage using the same camera that originally I'd built for surfing. And so from there, it became a question of who else could film in these conditions where a normal camera just isn't practical. And that really was the kickoff of the GoPro brand.
That set out to build wrist cameras for surfers.
As GoPro grew as a company, there was a sort of magic inflection point that allowed their popularity to explode. And that was the birth of YouTube. YouTube was, for the first time, a platform where people would be able to upload self-made content and make themselves look like heroes to an audience, whether it's their friends and family or beyond. And there just needed to be the right hardware that allowed them to do it. Now, this happened to coincide with when GoPro was launching their first line of digital cameras. So it's really the meeting of these two things. The rise of YouTube, GoPro switching over to digital, and then suddenly this huge audience of people that realize that for the first time, I can be the producer of content, I can look like a hero, whether I'm a car driver, whether I'm a bungee jumper, whether I'm a surfer, skateboarder, you name it. Suddenly YouTube was the platform where everyone could share this content, and GoPro took off.
Accepting the Emmy for the creation of inexpensive, small, rugged, high-def camcorders is the founder of GoPro and its CEO, Nick Woodman.
Now, there were innovations along the way. So, you know, GoPro had other things. They introduced a wider angle lens. They had removable memory cards, different things that sort of advanced the technology. But really, it was about tapping into that initial core audience. And as that audience grew, so did their market share, and eventually the market cap exceeded $1.6 billion with a B dollars.
The best-selling retailer in the country was a Pep Boys in Los Angeles. And when we inquired why was this particular Pep Boys selling dozens of cameras a week, we were told by the buyer that it was just down the street from Universal Studios, and that the people at Universal were buying them by the dozens to use as crash cams and to capture perspectives that were never before possible.
Of course, sometimes good things come to an end, and that definitely was the case for GoPro. Ultimately, what GoPro saw is that they reached a point of market saturation. Now, this is not an unfamiliar story. Generally, when products explode with popularity, there's an untapped potential that they're getting into. But once you've sold all the GoPros you're going to sell, you've got to figure out sort of what's that next thing? How do I expand even beyond this? Unfortunately, by the time that happened, GoPro had competition. There was Insta360, there were various Chinese companies that were beginning to flood the market with lower priced, knockoff camera systems that were in many ways as capable as GoPro, and so that's one current that they had to fight against. The second variable that was impacting GoPro at the time was that they realized that smartphones had gotten really good. And more specifically, the number of waterproof smartphones was exploding. And so what people were able to film in terms of quality and also in terms of the types of environment that they could film in with smartphones was now rivaling what GoPros could do. In fact, in some cases, it was even better than what GoPro was able to accomplish. So now they're fighting the competitive products that are directly within the action sport camera category, as well as smartphones. And you could begin to see that the market's position was softening. And then came the third variable. And this was around the mid-2010s, so 2015, 2016, drones really began to take off. So now, suddenly, all these people that had established channels and platforms for sharing their content on YouTube were using drones to capture footage that they might otherwise have used action cameras for. And if you were looking to spend, a good chunk of money, chances are you were going to pair a drone with maybe an off-brand camera, and then that would be your way of capturing what you're doing, as opposed to spending a lot of money on the name brand camera. And so between smartphones, between these sort of no-name action cameras, and between drones, GoPro was in a bad place. They attempted to recover by launching their own drones in 2016, but by 2018 they had pulled those from the market. They just were not a competitive offering. They had lots of technical issues, and that really was when GoPro saw the big contraction behind its sales and ultimately its market cap. One of the things that GoPro did really well, and part of the reason that they were able to capture the hearts and minds of such a broad audience, was they made us look like heroes. I mean, the name was very apt. And so this idea that all this footage that they were capturing, that they could repurpose for their own marketing efforts and then cut into montages, this created sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. They were able to sort of snowball all of these little video vignettes into year-end recap videos, into other remarketing efforts to continue to grow and grow that audience. Now, although that audience today is fairly saturated, the reality is there's always an up-and-coming generation of kids that are excited about learning a new skill, mastering a new trick. And so there is hope that for 2025 and beyond, if they can tap into that ethos, if they can tap back into that same excitement, that they can again reclaim some of the market that they've lost along the way. But GoPro really does need to focus on innovation moving forward in order for them to recapture even a fragment of the market share that they'd lost along the way.
It's authentic, it's real, it's life. It's GoPro.
Now, if you like this story, please definitely give us a like. Drop a comment if you've used a GoPro or had an experience using one, or maybe even one of the knockoff products. If you're a GoPro user that switched to drones, tell us about that as well. Otherwise, be sure to subscribe. We've got plenty more content coming, and we look forward to seeing you on future episodes of Ground Floor Innovation. Thanks for joining us.